Thank you, Monica.
Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of God. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of this day and the opportunity to learn and grow. As we begin this online review, we humbly ask for your guidance. Grant us focus and clarity of mind. Help us to understand the lessons, remember the concepts, and apply them wisely. Calm our hearts when we feel overwhelmed. Strengthen our determination and discipline to persevere until we reach our goal. Bless our teachers and fellow learners. May we all grow in wisdom and knowledge. Lord, we entrust to you our preparation. May this journey bring us closer to success and to you. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Ready to share the screen? Okay. So maybe you can invite some others then to join us. No, nasa orientation. So you can just give the ano. Okay. So yeah, I decided not to proceed to principles of city design. I think so that I already have a ano to old, or you can already view the continuation of economic planning from the Zoom recordings. So I think I already have a complete recording of economic planning, so you can just check it out. Yung mga previous ano natin, no? Previous lectures. So I'd like to proceed with principles of city design. Okay. Let me see ano yung nauna doon. So maybe you can proceed to the next slide. Ay. Yan ba yung ano? So there are four key concepts there. Image of the city, new urbanism, heritage conservation, and green cities. So just to provide overview on those. Let's start um with Kevin Lynch. So advance to two slides, Jen. Okay, advance mo pa. Okay, yeah. So Kevin Lynch is known for, you know, his foundational work on legibility of the cityscape. He's also known for introducing the concept of legibility in urban environments. So let me just check. Let's me just check. Okay. So when we speak of legibility, we are referring to how easily the form and layout of a city can be understood by its residents and visitors. So in that particular viewpoint, okay? Um, s- and just to work on some definition of terms, a legible city is one where people can quickly make sense of where they are. So if you're standing there as a visitor and as a resident, then you would understand um if your city is a legible city. So how to get from one place to another also is one objective. Why we need to discuss, why we need to understand what a legible city is and how different parts um of the city relate to each other. In Kevin Lynch terms, a city with high legibility allows individuals to recognize its various parts. What are these parts? We have the districts, landmarks, pathways, okay, um, and organize this into a coherent mental map. So, why is this important for us planners? When a city is legible, it becomes more navigable, it becomes safe, or it becomes safer and more pleasant for everyday activities. People can move through its spaces with confidence, orient themselves easily, and remember key places. So this sense of order is not about rigid grids or monotonous designs. Rather, it's about creating city or creating a city where the structure is easily read and interpreted by those who use it. So does that make any difference, when we are trying to analyze a legal concept, or a design concept? Because this one, we also need to understand the city, and we also need to interpret what makes up this city. So Lynch also identified specific elements that contribute to the imageability of a city, which he categorized into five types: paths, landmarks, edges, nodes, and districts. In 2019, licensure examination, there were 50 items about just Kevin Lynch, about these elements of a city. So that was the time of the um, so was the late Josie Ramos or Josefina Ramos. She's an architect. She was an architect, okay? So Lynch also identified specific elements, okay? Uh, and he had different categorizations. So let's try to start with um can you move to the next slide? Let's see what's um, okay, this. Okay, you can go there. You can stay there, okay. So, paths are that bakit hindi ko nakikita this moment? Okay. Hmm. Okay, paths are the channels along which people move. What are these? What are these channels? Okay, what are these concepts that we can relate to paths? So, in Kevin Lynch context, paths are paths include streets, walkways, transit lines, canals, or any route people use to navigate through the city. For most people, paths are the most important organizing feature, um, or yeah, feature because they provide the framework for movement and orientation. Sa moment, I'll just get water. Okay, saglit lang ha. And then second is landmarks. their prominent points of reference, usually physical objects or structures which stand out from their surroundings. These can be monuments, okay, buildings, towers, or natural features. So, landmarks help people identify their location and orient themselves in relation to the city. Okay. Um, Edges also are linear elements that form boundaries between two areas. They may be actual physical barriers like walls, rivers, or major roads, or more subtle transitions such as a change in land use or building style. So there are also called edges. So edges help define and separate different zones within the urban environment. Okay. So nodes. Let's go to nodes. Nandiyan ba yung nodes sa
Meron po ma'am dito sa may next slide po.
next slide? Okay. Transition na siya sa next slide. Did you call some others from the orientation GC? So let's try to invite them also, Jenna, while I'm talking. Okay. Nodes are strategic focal points where activities are concentrated or where important decisions about direction are made. Examples include intersections, city squares, or transport hubs. So can you now see the difference? Can you make distinction between edges and nodes? Um, so nodes serve as anchors in the mental map of the city, often becoming recognizable meeting points or centers of activity. So probably that's the keyword. Okay. Districts are medium to large scale sections of the city within or with a distinct identity or character. And these are areas that people can mentally enter and recognize as having a particular atmosphere or function, such as the financial district, a historic hub or quarter, or residential neighborhood. So, in summary, Kevin Lynch theory guides us as planners to think not just the physical environment of urban spaces, but also about how those spaces are perceived and understood by the people who use them. So a well-designed, legible city enhances wayfinding. It also fosters a sense of place and ultimately improves the quality of urban life. Okay. The next slide. Hmm. Is it the next one? Can you go back to the previous slide? Parang magkaiba, no? Okay. Um, I'm looking for that slide na mayroong ano. Ma, sige nga, next one. Na nodes. Ah, paths and choose this. Okay. Sige, yan na lang. Uh, that's the central, is that the Central Park area? So, okay. Some, is that someone unmute and tell me what's the prevailing design there? Ano yung element dyan?
Node, ma'am, or landmark. Parang node.
Node. How about, okay, let me see the, okay. 'Di ba yung ang tinutukoy natin yung sa Central Park area, parang park, 'di ba, no? Uh, uh, if we go back there, okay. Can you see also, parang pwede lang node. If we go back to the definition of node, they are strategic points or centers of activity within the city. So, there are locations where paths intersect. Tama nga naman, ano? Na parang they're,
Pwede ding landmark, ma'am.
oo nga eh. Pero yung landmark, but landmark, don't look at the building from afar. Kung ano yung, you know, dyan sila, maraming nakakuha, maraming hindi, ganon. Because s- it depends on the problem. Yung sasabihin sa problem. So, you have to focus when you answer a question on the five elements. You need to look at the what it is asking and then the picture. Kasi baka lang, pag tingnan mo, baka nakakoncentrate ka lang sa picture, no? But it depends on what the problem is asking you. Okay ba tayo? So, um, pero pag the question is about the, parang meron siyang sasabihin na where something significant happens or places that draw people in. So, parang center of activity yun. Yun yung node. And then, it will tell you, basta magsasabi naman yung yung sa problems sa board exam ninyo. If it is the it is a place where it is a strategic point or centers of activity within a city. Pag ganon node yung i-answer natin. Pero kapag reference points, and then we answer landmark. But in this case, um, it does not, say it is, parang, it is a large green open space. So it's likely a park. Okay, it's a park or, but these paths, you notice how the paths radiate and cross through the green space, 'di ba? And then it links, pero wag mong tignan yung wag mong tignan yung building doon kapag wala namang sinasabi, just the layout. When it's a layout and it clearly says it's a path because these are these are routes that people use to move across the site. Although there's a node doon, depends yung problem talaga. But if it tells you describe or what is the element, uh, pointing to the center. Pag may center, ganon, then it could be a node, di ba? It could be a node. Pero pag it is referring to the street, ganon, so you answer path. Okay? Kasi the it's like a plaza in itself. And pwede rin siyang node. Pag sinabing serving as a gathering spot or focal point within the district, then you answer node. And then, pag sinabi namang the buildings, ano ba, maiiba yung building, babaguhin lang nila. I remember post office kasi yung picture noon post office or the problem. Basta post office yung ano. And then, 'di ba yung sa post office, it talks about may bridge doon, merong ano. So it could be a landmark, it could be many things. So you have to be very careful kasi sayang yung points ninyo. So if it's refers to the roots, then it is the concept of paths. Okay, and then pwede rin sabihin na the buildings surrounding the green um act the green area which act as blank. Parang ganun. Defining the boundary. Pag sinabing defining the boundary of the open space, then you answer edges, 'di ba? Parang and this and so if we try to look at this picture, ang daming basta hindi siya landmark kasi landmark is something na parang oriented siya on top, parang gano'n. So, yun yung una mong makikita when you're lost, di ba? In a particular place. So, it provides identity, parang gano'n. But if it is a park, it could be a node kapag it's pointing on the, no? It could also be a district pag may building siya sa loob. And it could also be edge pag it's describing the boundary. Okay? Then we go to the next slide. Ay, hindi pala slide. Okay. Diyan yung drawing pa din. Punta pa rin to. Yan. Okay. The next, ano kaya ito? Central Park pa din. Ano? Central Park. Uh, Top right image. Okay. Is it New Delhi ba ito? So it is an example of a node actually yung sa right side. Because there are multiple radial paths or streets and they are organized into that. So that's a node. That's a meeting, there's a center there. So the circular arrangement highlights how powerful nodes can serve as organizing centers for entire districts. So the roads, pag itatanong naman, yung outward aspect niya na the the roads or the paths radiate outward. So it connects the center to different parts of the city. So the edges in this layout are defined by the concentric circles and the inner and outer rings of roads further separating zones and making navigation easier. So this in itself it functions as both a district with a recognizable character and identity kasi ano ba yung definition ng district, but it's also a node within the larger city. Pero but just be careful about again about answering. Could be anything, okay? Um then dito sa baba niya, that's the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. Um Triumph. The bottom image there, parang landmark ba to? Okay, just a moment. So it is an iconic in itself. Yung arc na yan, in Paris. is an iconic landmark. It is a physical object easily visible from many vantage points, di ba? Serving as a reference for orientation. But it's also a node where multiple major avenues converge, creating a focal point for movement and activity. So, the surrounding avenues are examples of paths. Makita mo yung paths dyan. And then, while the Grand Boulevard and the change in urban texture around the place mark the edges also. Pero hindi naman ganito kagulo yung ano yung papakita nila eh. So, during that time that examinees were taking the exam in 2019 or 18, it was that time that when they describe that there were 50 items and blah blah blah. And then also I also happened to speak to the chairman during that time after the exam na hindi naman before ano, hindi naman, so off the record ito. So I asked her ganito, but I just would like to share it, no? And then she told me there were some testing centers na kulang yung figure, ano? So, during that time, the test questions daw kasi is, meron sa, yung problem are in front, the figure is at the back, no? Same page yun. But I'm not sure kasi ngayon ay kwan na kayo eh. Paano kaya yun, ano? Later na lang pag-usapan yung manner of examination ninyo, kung digital ba kayo or ano talaga. During that time na test questions yun, so meaning pen and paper no na exam. There were some regions na or testing centers na may nawawala, and so yeah, she tried to solve that problem by adjusting the scores actually. And so that was the highest rating so far pati hanggang ngayon, so like 60% ba yun? Maybe I can check later ilang percent yan. So, malas lang pag ano, no, kasi piniprint sa bawat testing center, hindi yun ipapadala na galing ng Manila. Lahat sa printing is at the site talaga. Then, yun ang 50 items, and I'm really, ano kaya, ano, magbibigay kaya sila ulit ng ganito. So, it's quite challenging because you're seeing it like a node, but the problem says it is asking about identity. So, siyempre pag identity, ang function nung area is a landmark. But if it says a melting pot or a center of activity, then you have to answer node. Um, but if it's talking about boundary, and then you answer edges. And if it's talking about the whole thing, how bulky, how large the place is, you have to answer district. Uh, and kapag it's talking about people walk in and out, and then that's the path. So depends, okay? Um, we can go to new urbanism and a lot. So I'll give you parang mock exams on Kevin Lynch. Meron akong mga binibigay-bigay noon. But this is really very important, a topic. So new urbanism. What is new urbanism? It emerged in the early 1990s as a response. So it served as a response. So ibig sabihin, there was a problem, there was an issue, and it needs a solution, and that is what you call a response. And it so happened that new urbanism functioned as a response that emerged in the 1990s to the fragmented, car-dependent, and inefficient patterns of urban growth that became common in the US, especially after World War II. New urbanism is a city design movement. Okay, it's a city design movement that aims to reverse the effects of haphazard and poorly planned urban expansion. Okay, so I hope you understand that framework. So it means that it it created communities, or it's about creating communities that are not only more organized, but also more livable, inclusive, and walkable. Kaya if the problem is on the inclusions, or what is n- what is not a, what are the characteristics, so versus identify the uh the extreme, or the least uh quality that characterizes new urbanism. Ibig sabihin, siya yung pinaka-least na pwede mong maisip to include. So, it means that all could be a concept, or a characteristic of new urbanism, but meron isa doon na outlier, or it could be it could be detached. Okay. So, but please include organized, livable, inclusive, and walkable. And this um this response in the form of new urbanism is not just, it's not really about architectural solution only. It was a change, okay, in public policy and development practice, so that cities and towns can become better places for people from all walks of life. Okay? And so a key feature of new urbanism is that it operates at multiple scales, not just applying to individual buildings or lots. They're intended to shape entire blocks, neighborhoods, cities, and even entire regions. So whether you're designing a single street or an entire city plan, the same set of guiding ideas should apply. Encourage walkability, integrate different land uses, so like a mixed use, and also foster a strong sense of place and community. So new urbanism called for communities that are diverse and integrated. It means diversity not only in the types of people who live and work there, but also in the uses and activities present in the area. So you can imagine diverse people, diverse activities, diverse work, okay? And so if we caught Peter Calthorpe, one of the founders of the movement, new urbanism is creating places where shops, schools, housing, parks, and businesses are all mixed together. And crucially, where all of these can be reached safely and comfortably on foot. So, understand the walkability characteristics. Okay. The goal is to create lively, functional, and inclusive neighborhoods that encourage social interaction, reduce dependence on cars, and make daily life easier and more enjoyable for everyone. Okay, so that was the concept of new urbanism. So, when we think about okay, there are some concepts on new communities or planning for new communities, or are we indeed retrofitting old ones? So there are questions to be asked within this context. Are we designing places that encourage walking, so and social interaction? Are we allowing for a mix of uses and diversity of people? Are our policies supporting the development of connected, livable communities rather than isolated subdivisions? So if we follow the principles of new urbanism, um, so we need to be think we need to think in the framework of, being functional, development should be vibrant, sustainable, and very welcoming. And ganon. So we can go to the next slide. To the next. Okay. Um, so there are core principles, okay, of new urbanism and what they mean in practice for planners. Neighborhood should be diverse in use and population, okay? People and land use. So this principle rejects the traditional zoning model where residential, commercial, and institutional uses are strictly separated. Instead, new urbanism encourage a mix use. Homes, shops, workplaces, parks, and schools are integrated within walking distance. This mix of uses naturally attracts a diverse population, allowing people of different ages, backgrounds, and economic means to share the same community. In practice, this could mean including affordable housing within a development or making sure everyday needs are accessible without a car. Okay? So it's not a car-centric environment. Number two, communities should be designed for the pedestrian and for public transit as well as the car. New urbanism recognizes the importance of the human scale. Streets and public spaces must feel safe, comfortable, and attractive for people on foot, not just for drivers, right? And so this means having wide sidewalks, safe crossings, what else? Trees for shade, and amenities that encourage walking and cycling. Public transit should be prioritized and well integrated so people have real alternatives to car travel. Like, okay, and you can see all these images here, showing lively walkable spaces and places where pedestrians feel they belong and where activities spill naturally into the public environment. Number three, cities and towns should be shaped by physically defined and universally accessible public spaces and common community institutions. So strong communities should have shared spaces such as plazas, parks, libraries, schools, and other civic buildings. And so these places should be easy to find, open to everyone, and designed um, for being functional, and not just for aesthetic purposes. They help foster a sense of belonging, encourage interaction, and build social capital. So public spaces here should be the backbone of community life, not an afterthought. Number four, Urban places should be framed by architecture and landscape design that celebrate local history. So we're talking about heritage here. Climate, ecology, and building practice. So new urbanism values context. Buildings and landscapes should respect and reflect the unique characteristics of their place. This means using local materials and building techniques, honoring local traditions, and responding to the natural environment, such as designing with the climate in mind or preserving natural features. When urban design reflects its setting, it strengthens local identity and helps create a sense of place. Okay, so we can go to the applications, the next slide. Next slide there. The next slide. Yeah. Um, so these are some applications of new urbanism principles. Syempre, do you know inner city? Inner city infill development. This approach maximizes the use of vacant or underused parcels within existing urban areas. Rather than expanding outward, infill development revitalizes city neighborhoods, improves land efficiency, and supports walkable environments by filling gaps in the urban environment. So this is very true in especially in a city where compact development is key in their development strategies. So I'm not sure really about e-housing, but let's just include that like it refers to innovative or electronic housing solutions. Um, but this means that it refers to modular homes, smart housing, or new construction technologies that make residential development more flexible, efficient, and adaptable to changing needs. What are these modular homes anyway? So, yeah, probably you have better ideas than myself, those who are involved in um I mean in housing development or okay, so you can share your ideas later. Affordable housing is the central application of new urbanism. So creating homes for a range of income levels within the same neighborhood supports social diversity and ensures that essential workers can live near their jobs, schools, and amenities. And so, diversity here refers to land uses and population. So, the TOD, mm, it's a typographical error. It should be transit-oriented development. So, na-type over lang ito, sorry. But that is TOD, okay? Tented, tented nakalagay, but this should be transit-oriented developments. Apologies for the typo error. And so these are designed around access to public transportation by clustering housing, shops, and services near transit shops. So these developments reduce car dependency and make it easier for people to use public transport for daily activities. Okay. So nag-jump yung ano niya. So, let me check that. Okay, saan na yan? Oriented. Mixed use. Okay. Mixed use. We go to mixed use. We'll check later. We will check this slide. Mixed use developments blend residential, commercial, institutional, and sometimes even industrial spaces within the same project or district. And this approach brings daily needs closer together, shortens commutes, encourages walking, and helps build vibrant communities. How about new towns? New urbanism principles can be applied to building entirely new towns from the ground up. So these are designed to avoid the mistakes of car-oriented sprawl, uh, ensuring that new communities are compact, connected, and have a mix of uses from the start. So it's not new urbanism is not limited to one type of project. Okay, could be a new town, could be old neighborhoods. So introducing innovative housing or building new cities. So the goal remains the same, to create places where people can live, work, and interact comfortably and sustainably. We can go to the next slide. Those are all pictures there. So, next slide. Jen? Okay. Sige lang. We can move to the other slide. We are now on the next concept of heritage conservation. It refers, next slide. I think we have written something there. Okay. Cultural heritage refers to the collection of beliefs, values, practices, and objects that define the character and identity of a place. So every city, town, or barangay has its own set of stories, traditions, and artifacts that make it unique. And so these elements help shape the identity of a community, creating a sense of continuity and belonging for its residents. When we discuss practices, we're talking about living traditions like customs that are passed down from generation to generation. And that this might include local rituals, annual festivals, community ceremonies, or even daily habits that are particular to a group or area. And such practices not only strengthen social ties, but also embody the values and views of the people who observe them. So as for objects, heritage can be divided into two categories, the and tangible. Intangible heritage includes things you can't touch, like historical events or oral histories, legends, and traditional knowledge. So these are often expressed through stories, performances, songs, and community practices, while tangible heritage refers to physical items, things like old furniture, architectural details, native delicacies, textiles, crafts, and artifacts. So these objects provide visible, concrete links to the past and serve as reminders of the skills, artistry, and lifestyles of earlier generations. This is important for planners because we need to recognize the value of both practices and objects, preserving them not just for their historical importance, but because they continue to shape community life and identify or an identity today. So, protecting heritage goes beyond saving old buildings. It involves keeping traditions alive and ensuring that future generations remain connected to their roots. We can go to the slides. So, these are some of the pictures. They um traditional dishes represents tangible cultural heritage, and food is a powerful symbol of Filipino identity. The recipes and we celebrate our culinary practices, which are passed down through generations and form an important part of community celebrations. So, heritage conservation is not confined in preserving all buildings, as I mentioned earlier, but also it touches on safeguarding traditional foods, food preparation techniques, and the social customs that surround communal meals. Pero of course, it has evolved, di ba? Meron na tayong boodle, di ba? Mga ganon. Uh, but I think it's also, yeah, it was also practiced before. Now, there's church wedding. Yeah, they are part of intangible heritage because these are customary practices. These are rituals also, ceremonies. Filipino weddings are rich in symbolic acts, from the wearing of the barong and traditional attire to rituals such as um the veil cord, coins, ganon. And so these practices are part of our collective memory and reinforce values such as family, community, and faith, and many more. So, then festivals also, or there's street dance like Ati-Atihan, Sinulog, Dinagyang. These are festivals, and street dances are vivid expressions of living heritage. And so they're not just spectacles, they keep traditions alive. And strengthen local identity. So the costumes, music, choreography, and stories behind the performances carry meanings rooted in history, faith, and social experience. So they also stimulate local economies and attract tourism, which makes their preservation both a cultural and economic imperative. So, Quiapo Church, um, yeah, it's about our, and because we have devotees also of the Black Nazarene, so we have sea of devotees. They demonstrate both tangible and intangible heritage. The church building itself is a historic landmark. It's a tangible asset, actually. So the devotion to the Black Nazarene with its massive annual procession is intangible heritage. These rituals foster community solidarity and collective faith, making them central to the identity not just of Manila, but of Filipinos everywhere. So, heritage conservation, our task is to recognize, respect, and safeguard both the objects and the practices that define who we are as people. This involves protecting historic sites and buildings, but equally supporting the survival and transmission of rituals, festivals, also culinary traditions. In land use planning, zoning, and community development, planners should ensure that spaces remain available for these practices and that policies value both tangible and intangible heritage as integral to sustainable and inclusive development. So we go to the next line. And, there are some concepts in the next slide. Next slide. So, okay, man-made tangible objects are the most familiar category. Okay, I already mentioned about tangible. This include built structures such as ancestral houses, churches, government buildings, bridges, and monuments. So, we have, I think I mentioned also, during my lecture on Kevin Lynch, five elements, since here are the elements of the city. Here, examples in the Philippines are the old Manila Post Office, okay? The San Agustin Church in Intramuros, and the ancestral homes along Calle Crisologo in Vigan. These structures are witnesses to history and serve as markers of identity for local communities. So, one reminder for everyone is for you to be familiarized with landmarks in, especially in Metro Manila, okay, Cebu, Davao, and other parts that you think so that would make up all these concepts because you need to be familiar with the places like yun na nga, some people are not familiar with the post office in Manila, and so they were not able to answer correctly. Hindi on point yung ano, they're not, being unfamiliar is, it weakens your concept of the of the elements of a city by Kevin Lynch. Okay? So, what else? Natural, 'di ba? Man-made, tangible objects. Then we have natural, tangible objects, refer to landscapes and geographic features that are valued for their natural beauty, uniqueness, or cultural importance. So in the Philippines, we have examples such as Chocolate Hills of Bohol, the Mayon volcano in Albay, Banawe rice terraces in Ifugao, and many more. So these natural sites are not only geological wonders, but also form part of the nation's collective memory and pride. Then we also have movable. Tangible objects include items that can be transferred or relocated. So that's very literal, okay? Examples are paintings, sculptures, manuscripts, historical documents, or artifacts displayed in museums. These are just as important as buildings or landscapes since they provide insight into the everyday life, artistry, and achievements of past generations. Immovable, tangible objects are those that are fixed to a location and cannot be moved without losing their value. Okay? So, aside from buildings, this includes public spaces like streets and town plazas, like Plaza Miranda in Quiapo or the Town Plaza in Poway, Ilocos Norte. So on a larger scale, entire districts can also be recognized as heritage sites. For example, Binondo, San Nicolas in Manila are historic districts known for their unique architecture and cultural mix. Even entire cities such as Vigan in Ilocos Sur are celebrated as UNESCO World Heritage Sites because of their well-preserved Spanish colonial architecture and town planning. So it's important for planners to understand different types of tangible heritage, which are essential for effective conservation, whether we're dealing with a single artifact, or historic street, or entire city. The goal is to preserve these resources, not just for their physical appearance, but for the stories and values they represent. And we as planners play a key role in ensuring that development respects and integrates these assets into urban and regional planning. We need to strengthen our sense of place and cultural continuity. Next, next slide. The benefits, okay, benefits. Um, we have social benefits. Heritage assets play a key role in building and maintaining a community's unique character. So, they are relics of the past, uh, but at the same time, they're living elements that help define who we are as as a people. By protecting and promoting these assets, we foster pride of place and strengthen social cohesion. So, residents are more likely to feel connected to their city or town when they see their stories and traditions reflected in the environment around them. So, how about economic benefits? Heritage conservation is a powerful driver of local economies. Well-preserved sites attract visitors and boost tourism, which in turn creates jobs and generates revenue for local governments and businesses. It also supports creative distance or sorry, sandali. Cre- um sorry, merong insect. It also supports creative industries such as crafts, food, and cultural events. Importantly, investments in heritage often have a multiplier effect. Remember, location quotient, the LQ. So we have a formula. When LQ is greater than 1, uh, for example, tourism. So if it's more than 1, then, and we are talking about a city, vegan city, for example, then it means that uh, in terms of tourism, it's higher, it's stronger than the overall, the um, parent locality, which is the province. Okay, so it's powerful driver of local economies, and we can measure that to LQ, or the location quotient concept. So, well preserved sites attract visitors and boost tourism. Uh, so it also supports what else? Creative industries I mentioned, I think earlier, crafts, food, cultural events. So be having if it creates multiplier effect, it means that restoring a historic district can stimulate private investment and revitalization in the surrounding area. How about political benefits? A city or municipality that values its heritage projects or assets projects or it projects an image of stability. It also projects an image of order and good governance because well-maintained landmarks demonstrate the competence and authority of local officials, signaling that they care about community values and the public good. And so this enhances public trust and can improve the standing of officials both within the community and with external partners. How about environmental benefits? Preserving heritage structures is also an environmentally responsible choice. Older buildings, when properly maintained and adapted for more modern use, typically have a lower carbon footprint than new construction. So the materials and energy already invested in these structures are preserved, reducing the need for additional resource extraction and minimizing construction waste. So, um, yeah, next we can go to the next. I think this is the last slide for heritage conservation. Um, this is very important, the concept of adaptive reuse within heritage conservation um context. Adaptive reuse refers to the process of giving old buildings a new purpose while retaining their significant historical features. Okay, that's easy to understand, and there's no way that you should not. There's no way that you should ignore this one because this is the only concept or one of the few concepts under heritage conservation na laging yan yung laging tinatanong, okay? In urban design questions or heritage conservation. So adaptive reuse. It also means updating the function of a structure, such as turning an old theater into a library, or a warehouse into a market, or a heritage house into a boutique hotel, while preserving its character and architectural integrity. So the most successful adaptive reuse projects are those that respect and retain the unique heritage elements of the building rather than erasing or um, deleting history. They build upon it, layering new houses or new uses and contemporary design in ways that add value for present and future generations. This balance ensures that the building's story continues instead of being lost through neglect or inappropriate alteration. In some cases, adaptive reuse is the only practical way to ensure a historic building survives. Many old structures can no longer support their original use due to economic, social, or technological changes. If left vacant or underused, these buildings risk falling into disrepair. By finding a new use that fits current needs, we can justify their maintenance and investment, making sure that the community continues to benefit from these heritage assets. So, um, we can go to let's see, how about the next slide? Let me check. Are there some photos there? Okay. Some those images there show how this works in practice. So um the the first photo there is an architectural rendering of, let me check. Okay, it's a rendering of how of a heritage building integrated into mixed-use development, demonstrating how old and new can coexist. The other image there shows an actual historic structure in its adaptive reuse state. Its original architecture features retained, but its function updated to remain relevant in today's urban landscape. So adaptive reuse is a technical solution. It's also a creative and sustainable strategy. It makes better use of existing resources, preserves cultural identity, supports urban regeneration, and reduces the environmental impact associated with demolition and new construction. And so it also allows communities to retain visible links to their history even as their needs change. Okay, so um the green development, I think that's the last concept there. The next slide. Green development. So next slide. Um, Green development, it has evolved already over time, meron tayong blue, green, mga ganon. But for the sake of understanding, having a, a bird's eye view on green development as or in relation to our preparation for the board exam. Let's try to do some definition of terms here. Green development requires that growth and investment take place only in areas that are safe from natural hazards. So that's one framework. And this means careful site selection and land use planning, avoiding zones prone to flooding, landslides, earthquakes, or other disasters. So the goal is to minimize risk to people, property, and infrastructure while reducing the long-term cost of recovery and emergency response. Second, green development seeks to limit the carbon footprint of urban growth. So cities are major sources of greenhouse gas emissions, which drive global warming and climate change. So by adopting low carbon strategies, such as improving energy efficiency, promoting public transportation using renewable energy, and supporting compact, walkable neighborhoods, we can significantly reduce emissions associated with buildings, transport, and other urban activities. Third, protecting and enhancing natural ecosystems is a central priority. Healthy ecosystems provide essential services that sustain life and urban economies. So these include purifying air and water, breaking down waste, pollinating crops, protecting against extreme weather, and maintaining soil fertility. So when we plan for green development, we ensure these services continue for future generations, supporting both environmental health and community well-being. So, there are many ways to execute green development, like adding more parks, planting trees, incorporating green, environment in subdivisions. It's about also integrating safety, sustainability, and ecological stewardship into every planning decision. So by following these objectives, we create communities that are safer, more resilient, and better equipped to face the challenges of a changing climate and growing population. So the different approaches there. Next slide is, of course, on the next slide. Okay. So mm, so green development as an approach, it should treat, or green development treats the city, suburbs, and countryside as one interconnected and evolving system that operates within nature. This means breaking down the artificial barriers between urban and rural areas, and recognizing that what happens in one part of the region affects the others. For example, decisions made in urban centers like waste management, water use, or land conversion can have direct impacts on surrounding farmland, forests, and waterways. Second, the approach encourages us to cultivate and nurture nature in our urban environments, not just treat it as something to be controlled or removed. Just as a garden requires care and attention, cities should integrate green spaces, support biodiversity, and use landscaping that reflects local ecosystems. And this shift in attitude means that trees, parks, green roofs, and natural waterways are seen as vital infrastructure, okay? Not just amenities. So the third is effective green development relies on understanding and working with natural factors such as topography, hydrology, geology, and local climate. So instead of trying to override natural systems through expensive engineering solutions, planners should design with the landscape. This includes respecting floodplains, managing stormwater naturally, and adapting to microclimates, because addressing hazards like Landslides or flooding at the planning stage is both more practical and more cost effective than relying solely on technological solutions. So, green development requires a systems-based mindset, one that values nature as an active partner in shaping healthy, resilient communities. Okay. So now, just the next slide or the last slide there, just enumerated the different examples that we can see in a green development, like rehabilitation, adoption of urban green spaces, like improving parks, gardens, open areas within the city to make them more accessible, resilient, beneficial for both people and wildlife. Examples include upgrading public plazas, creating green corridors, or converting vacant lands into community gardens. Then second is restoration and protection of urban wetlands and other sensitive habitats. What are urban wetlands in the first place? They're vital for flood control, water purification, and biodiversity. So restoring these habitats often involves removing invasive species. It also involves replanting native vegetation and preventing encroachment or pollution. Then next is preservation of old growth trees and forest areas. How do we do this? We protect mature trees and forests within or near cities. Uh, because it provides shade, it improves air quality and supports local wildlife as well. City ordinances that prevent unnecessary cutting of trees are an example of this strategy. Okay. Then urban watershed management is managing urban watersheds means yeah, it's protecting the sources of city water, the rivers, lakes, groundwater, also managing through pollution control, reforestation, sustainable land use practices. Then the next is river basin and coastal floodplain conservation plans. By conserving river basins and floodplains, cities can reduce flood risk. Cities can preserve habitats and support fisheries. So this includes setting aside no-build zones and restoring mangroves along coast, etc. And then next is endangered species habitat conservation plans. Some urban and peri-urban areas are home to threatened species. So protecting these habitats requires targeted planning, such as maintaining green belts or creating wildlife corridors, etc. Then urban gardening, farming, agriculture, urban agriculture helps increase food security. We can also reduce food miles, promote community engagement. So, these days we can see rooftop gardens, we can see vertical farming and backyard vegetable plots are they could be practical examples. Next is switching to renewable and non-polluting energy sources. Cities can reduce emissions and dependence on fossil fuels by investing in renewable energy projects such as hydroelectric, wind, solar, geothermal, and waste energy facilities, and many more. Um, I forgot the other one. It's biofuel or biomass. So green design. Next is green design of houses, buildings, and schools. This means constructing or retrofitting buildings to minimize energy and water use. It also maximize natural light and ventilation and use sustainable materials. For examples include green roofs, rainwater harvesting, and energy efficient appliances, and many more. So all these examples reflect a shift toward development that respects natural systems, reduces environmental impact, and creates healthier, more livable communities. As planners, these are the types of interventions we should prioritize in local plans, zoning ordinances, and project proposals, and in many more plans in our respective LGUs. So I think that would be all for tonight. Thank you, everyone. Jen, take it away for photo documentation. And meet you again tomorrow evening.